All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to call to order the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting, Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019. We are going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and everybody please follow me. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and may we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Ellsworth?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Here.
Councilmember Chateau?
Here.
Knudsen?
Present.
Oberstein?
Here.
Okay, we'll move now to the public forum. This is where members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern, not on the agenda this evening. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. And brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas. Okay. Okay. But in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Is there any public comment at this point?
Good afternoon. My name is Marisol Vargas. I am the property manager at Hunts Groves Apartments. I'm representing both the apartments, but also the public at large. I'm here to translate to one of my tenants, who's also a member of the community and has taken an initiative to ask a petition for adding some parking in a city lot that is adjacent to Hunts Groves Apartments and Start Street. It has been an issue ongoing for many years. The homeowners, the apartment complex, just even people that come to visit. So at this point, I'm going to give it to Rodolfo, and I will be translating. Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Señora del Concilio. Bueno. ¿Sí? Bueno, mi nombre es Rodolfo Morales. Hemos traído esta petición, ¿verdad? Es una gran necesidad que pues estamos solicitando a la ciudad. Necesitamos un parqueadero adicional en nuestra comunidad. Y aquí tengo las fotos.
He's bringing the position of asking for extra parking for our community, not just the apartments, but the community at large. And he has some pictures that he would like to show the council.
Como hemos sabido, un problema ha existido por largo tiempo en Santa Helena relacionado al estacionamiento de autos en el área de calles Star y Hans Group. Nosotros quienes firmamos esta petición, quienes somos residentes del área afectada por esta situación de falta de estacionamiento.
Well, are you guys okay just reading it, or do you want me to tell the public just the translation? But I think that they can see what his first statement is.
Okay.
Okay, so just give them.
Le pedimos a la ciudad de Santa Helena y sus gobernantes tomar una acción en atender la situación de estacionamiento, así promover las relaciones positivas entre los vecindarios también. Creemos que existen opciones muy viables en el área para establecer estacionamiento adicional que actualmente existe, cual no es suficiente, y pedimos a estas opciones sean exploradas por la ciudad y sus representantes. La necesidad de estacionamiento y la de vivienda son muy y serán necesidades a largo tiempo. Pedimos que discutan, implementen solución innovadora y comprometida lo más pronto posible para atender las necesidades de estacionamiento adicional, cual necesidad ha existido por mucho tiempo, y atender aún esta necesidad, ¿verdad?, de estacionamiento. Entonces yo tengo unas fotos que tomé de lo que actualmente ahorita estamos viendo que existe, lo que es en el área de Star Avenue.
There are some following up pictures just to give you an idea what the problem is with parking, how some homeowners have to basically patrol their own spaces by putting cones out. We do the best we can in the apartment complex to, respect that area, but sometimes you have no other place to park.
Como vemos aquí, bueno, se han puesto algunos conos en algunas áreas de las calles, nuestros vecinos, ¿verdad? Nosotros entendemos esta situación porque ya, por decir, por la tarde, ya cuando todos, la mayoría de los residentes, llegan a su hogar, ¿verdad? No hay donde estacionar el carro, que es un carro más adicional de lo que ya existe ahí en Hand Grove. Entonces, entendemos la situación tanto como de ellos también, ¿verdad? Los vecinos, que pues necesitamos tomar una acción sobre esto para evitar todos los conos.
They just would like, some action and for the city council to actually look at it. We want a good relationship with the neighborhood, but we only have certain amount of parkings at Hunts Grove. And I speak here for myself, the manager. I never knew I was going to be the meter, the lady that is, catching everybody that doesn't park where it belongs. We have so little space that I have no choice but to send out into the street people that have 2 cars, and families grows, and we have no other choice.
Sí, la segunda. Aquí en esta parte vemos que hay un área que hemos visto, ¿verdad?, que está entre Star Avenue y Hans Avenue. Entonces, nosotros pues hemos visto que posiblemente hay una posibilidad, ¿verdad?, para que este estacionamiento fuera adicional para dar esta solución al problema, ¿verdad?
That is the picture of the space that is at the end of Start. We sometimes even the tenants, clear it up and things like that just to keep the area with assistance from the city. And we are requesting to please look at the possibility of just open up that area and put a certain amount of parking that it will be to the public, that it will help the situation.
Bueno, en el segundo punto sería uno de los posibles áreas para estacionamiento, ¿verdad? Tenemos el que sigue. Bueno, es la misma área, ¿verdad?, del estacionamiento, pero tomada en foto por el lado de atrás, que más o menos sería para una capacidad de 30 carros, y son los que más o menos existen en el área de la calle, ¿verdad?, por la noche. Y
This one is the same picture, but taken from the other side, and just by doing some calculations and space, it looks like we could possibly put about 30 spaces there. That will really help the street, open it up for, regular visitors, for the homeowners that have no other place. Tenemos 16 segundos.
Okay. En el siguiente, en la otra sería ahí en las calles, ¿verdad? Son en esa más o menos, yo así más o menos diseñé, porque, tengo 160 personas que apoyan este plan, ¿verdad?, a nuestros vecinos. Entonces, esa es la parte que, bueno, la que acaban de quitar, es que podría quedar así, el estacionamiento, ¿verdad? Con un área para que camine la gente por la mañana. En este segundo punto, es otra opción que tenemos, es un área que es de la ciudad también, y existe una posibilidad también que podría ser otro punto para hacer estacionamiento por la ciudad.
He kind of like in the previous picture, kind of like design a little bit so the city can see that we're taking under consideration areas where people can still walk to the vineyards if they choose to do that. On the next picture is another spot that the city owns, that lot back there, that we could probably extend from the parking lot from Hans Grove's apartment. That place has just been totally abandoned, nothing happened to it, and it's just land that it could be used for parking and help the situation. We do have a petition of several people that we would like to pass and put it in the records as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And the petition, you have signatures on the petition from the community?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay,
Por último, perdón.
thank you. And so, thank you. So we can't enter any substantive discussion on this, but we can talk about the idea of agendizing this. I don't know if there's support to agendize this at some point here in the near future to discuss. I
No.
see.
I'd suggest we refer it to the city manager to look into what's been suggested and then
Okay.
bring it back when we have something to discuss, some options.
Okay. Does that sound good? Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating.
Thank you for being here. Is there any additional public comment at this point?
Hello, everyone. My name is Cheryl Kelly. I'm a resident at 11. I have 4 minutes,
Yes.
right? Now I know. Okay. I'm a resident at 1192 Meadow Creek Circle. I back up to Hunts Grove. I bought my home there because I really like the neighborhood and I really like Hunts Grove. So I want to thank the Morales family for taking the initiative to do this. I've lived in my home since 2003, so coming on 16 years. So I've watched a lot of the families grow up and a lot of the young adults who are driving the cars are going to college. So as a school teacher at St. Helena Unified School District, I'm very proud to see them driving each day to go to school and do the things that they're doing. I want to also express support for this issue. I would really love to see the council look at this. I think that you can drive through our neighborhood and clearly see kind of what's going on there. I actually think the photos were wonderful. I love the parking ideas that are being expressed, but they honestly don't do it justice because it's much more crowded than those photos were actually showing. And I almost didn't come tonight because I thought I was going to lose my parking place. So I just want to say thank you very much once again for taking the initiative to do this. And I also want to just lend my voice. I think my name is on that petition, and I want to lend my voice to supporting this. I think some of our other neighbors are sitting in the audience as well.
Very good. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I'm Mark Linder and my wife Mary Linder, and we live next door to Sherry, 1190 Meadow Creek Circle, and I just do applaud you for taking this initiative to see what we can work out in a neighborly way, because it is really getting serious. It's just not fun to come home from work every day and having to put garbage cans out in front to keep it so that we can have a place to park, or when our son-in-law and daughter comes over from Marin County, we have a hard time finding a place to park. Anyhow, I just think these options need to be seriously considered, and I'll be happy to, help sit down and talk about what could be worked out. Because when you see vacant land available, it just makes you think that we ought to be able to figure out a way to make it work as a win-win for both sides. So, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Is there any additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, I thank you all for coming, and we will move on to reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. And we will begin with our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council met earlier this meeting in closed session with respect to possible initiation of litigation, and no reportable action was taken. However, the council did give direction regarding proposed terms of settlement of the matter. Thank you.
Very good. And I'm seeing Ms. Smithies in the city manager's seat this evening. Our city manager, Mark Prestwich, is at a conference, and so Ms. Smithies is the acting city manager.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide an update on the public safety power shutoff that everyone should have been heard about by now. We're still gearing up for tomorrow for some portion of the city to be shut off, so I'd like to encourage everyone to check out the press release on the city's website and keep in the loop. The county's also providing updates via Nixle alerts as well. So it looks like portions of our city to the south are not going to be as affected. Schools are looking to be open, the St. Helena School District. However, we've been informed that there will be a possible national shutoff starting Saturday. So more to come on that tomorrow afternoon, but I just wanted to give everyone the latest and greatest that we have. We're also trying to coordinate with PG&E's been trying to put a community resource center in our city limits. It seems like the upper portions of the valley are going to be more affected by these power shutoffs. They've been coordinating with our staff all day and maybe potentially looking at sites around the city that are better suited or best suited. So if you hear of any churches or the junior college being tagged as potential sites, just if you think of an area that's about 10,000 square feet, what they're looking for.
This is for
PG&E supporting power shutoffs and charging stations for the community at large and our residents that are affected by the power shutoff. We do have backup generations. Lessons learned on 2 weeks ago is that we ordered generators in advance of this on Monday. As soon as we heard about it, we were given word. So we should not have the low water pressures in the higher jurisdictions of the city where we have pump stations for our utilities. However, we still stress to try to conserve water since we're on redundant power during those power shutoffs. Our water treatment plants in the high risk area and many of our pump stations are in the high risk areas. So hang in there. We're all in this together. So.
With respect to this area that PG&E is may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
With respect to this area that PG&E is looking for, it's just bare land, right? They would bring in like tenting and equipment and all that, or are they actually looking for a building?
They are bringing everything, generators, tents. They need ADA space, so they don't want a grassy area. They want a paved surface. So they did request Crane Park and one of our parks, and that's just not acceptable because it conflicts with, it's for 2 weeks. They want it not just for overnight. They want it for 2 weeks, 24/7. They'll staff it and power it. So we're trying to keep it out of areas of residential because generators are loud. But I don't know their system. They haven't given us enough site-specific details, but they're coordinating at the county OES and city.
Okay, thank you.
You know, along those lines, they're using a large area over off of Valley View for their staging for the helicopter work that's going on, which is intermittent. And I'm wondering if they couldn't camp out there for the duration.
We recommended Mitchell Drive because of the location in town, but because it's gravel and not ADA surface, or gravel can be ADA, but because it's not concrete, they were leery of that.
Concrete, okay.
Yes.
Okay. We'll move to our finance director, Ms. Mitz.
Great, thank you very much. I wanted to give an update to council members and to the public on the League of California Cities conference. So myself, council member Chateau, and Mayor Ellsworth, the three of us attended it, and great information. I wanted to give a quick update on the 2 voting resolutions that the council adopted to push forward. The one that went through was the Tijuana River pollution. The first item, which is amendment to Rule 20A, which has to do with providing funding for underground utilities. At this point, they're actually, the League of California Cities is going to defer a vote on that until January 2020. However, they will still advocate for this particular item because it would be safer for communities for underground wiring as opposed to overhead wiring. So I wanted to give that update that they did not actually vote on that at the conference, but it's going to be deferred. And then the second item I wanted to remind everyone, bring to your attention, call our department, look online, ask for questions, is the change to the utility billing. As of January 2020, we will be going to a bi-monthly billing. So what that means is your bill will actually be the exact The amount you pay throughout the year will be the exact same dollar amount. However, we're only going to be doing billing and collection 6 months out of the year instead of 12 months. So in the back of the meeting room, we have the same flyer, one's in English, one's in Spanish, explaining it. They also went out in the current utility bills. And so if you have not received your utility bill yet, you should be receiving this soon. For the next 3 bills, we are going to be doing flyers included in the bills. We've distributed literature to the library, Rionda House, oh gosh, I can't remember else. Our staff members literally walked up and down Main Street. The Chamber of Commerce is going to be putting out an e-blast for us. We're going to continue to do e-blasts just to make sure we get the information out. I will also be at the farmers market on Friday, so if anyone has questions, they can come to the farmers market. Also, more than welcome to come into City Hall or call at any time, and we can explain the program. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our city clerk. From planning, Mr. Heacock?
Nothing to report.
Councilperson Knudsen? Nothing to report? Ms. Chateau? Ms. Goberstein?
I just wanted to update you further on the JPA, which is our Joint Powers Agency that regulates garbage collection, refuse disposal. You might remember I told you recently that the JPA has a fair amount of money which fortuitously came to us because of all of the fire debris that was deposited at Clover Flat landfill, and we have decided to make that money available to the individual jurisdictions for projects that have some nexus to the overall, function and mission of the JPA. And I believe we will have a couple months to apply, as will everyone else. The final criteria has not been determined yet, but there is approximately $400,000 to be made available. And so I know we have discussed at least one project that has a nexus to garbage collection, which is improving the situation along Money Way. And I think if we can think of others, we should start to put together costs and a description of what we might do so that we can submit, early in the next year and possibly be awarded a grant to do some of that work.
Mr. Doring?
Just some accolades to the students of this wonderful school district for putting on a wonderful play called the Laramie Project. Very meaningful for me, being the father of a transgender person, to see a play like that in our community, to have these young people involved in it, a student-directed play, very meaningful, very powerful, very, painful to watch for me, but I'm very proud of our community to do that, and thank you to the students and the school district for making that happen. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to our Parks and Recreation Department for putting on an excellent community potluck, and for those who volunteered to make it happen. It was a wonderful event. Music, jazz was great. The apple dessert competition was great. Fellow council member Mary Coperstein was involved in that, as always, working very hard for the community, doing things that nobody sees but I see, and she should be recognized for that. Thank you for the community to come out on that. So, great things are happening outside of city council meetings that we should acknowledge, and I do. With respect to city council business, I would ask one of my fellow council members, maybe all of us, to support me in bringing back, through an agenda item, another review of our legal services policy. I think it's time to update it. It's been a while. I know it's relatively new. There's a couple issues that I have in mind that we need to focus in on, and one of them in particular is how we receive our bills and review those bills. And so I would like to have that agendized in no particular hurry in the next couple months. So that would be something I would ask the council to support.
I'll agree to that.
Yeah. And
We all would.
Yep.
I think I'll hold off there. I have a couple other things, but I know time's of this.
Thank you. I, too, want to thank city staff and Parks and Rec, for both the the potluck and also the Harvest Festival and Pet Parade. It was a wonderful day and a success, and it's the work of our city staff that makes that possible. So we just want to say thank you. The power shutoff, we'll be listening to what PG&E says and what the county says, and we're very closely tuned to that. I think the most important lessons we continue to talk about are making sure that everybody has 2 to 3 days of non-perishable food and water on hand, remaining calm. We know that our police and fire on our departments are on high awareness. We'll have, if there's a power shutdown, charging station at City Hall. Information can be gained at City Hall. We may also have charging stations at the library and possibly at the Up Valley campus of Napa Valley College. For that, we wait for the county to let us know through the Emergency Operations Center. But we're keeping tuned to that, so we'll let the community know through our alerts as we know more. So everybody remaining calm, checking on neighbors, helping neighbors. We were able to get through last time with no incidents, so we expect to do the same. I'll touch back on the water issue. The reason we ask folks to conserve water during a power shutoff is that our water services will then be on a generator, and so we don't want to overstress those generators. We will be fully functional, but we just want to make sure we don't overstress the system. So during a power outage, we just ask that everybody conserve to the best of their ability. I recently met with the Bicycle Coalition to talk about continuing to find ways to make this a safer place for people and kids to bike, and how we can help make sure that kids can walk and bike to school. Part of that is educating our drivers, to making sure that our drivers are paying attention to our speed limits and operating in a safe and alert manner. Club 25 is the club that you join by driving the speed limit and being part of a culture that is thinking about everybody on the road. So with that, I think that's all I have, and so we will move now into our presentations and public recognitions. We have 2, and I'll move up to the podium. First, we'll have our 4th annual St. Helena Movember Men's Health Month, November 1st through November 30th, 2019, and this will be presented to Chris Hartley, our acting police chief. And then our second proclamation will be the National Friends of Libraries Week proclamation, presented to Maria Criscione, Stel, St. Helena Public Library Friends and Foundation Executive Director. So I'll move up to the podium and we'll do the proclamations. We'll start with the Movember Men's Health Month. This is the City of St. Helena Proclamation, 4th Annual St. Helena Movember Men's Health Month, November 1st through November 30th, 2019. Whereas prostate cancer is the second most common cancer in men in the U.S., and testicular cancer is the most common cancer in young men aged 15 to 34 in the U.S., and around 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. will experience a mental health problem in a given year. And whereas numerous studies have shown that early detection of any form of cancer is instrumental in combating the disease, and since using early detection tests for prostate cancer became fairly common in the United States around 1990, the prostate cancer death rate had dropped. And whereas the American Cancer Society recommends prostate cancer screenings for men of average risk who are 50 years old or higher, men of high risk who are 45 years or older, and men of even higher risk, those with 2 or more direct relatives who have had prostate cancer, who are 40 years and older. And whereas the key to educating people about the benefits of early detection through routine exams is creating awareness campaigns designed to stimulate conversation, and whereas the Movember movement, which began in 2003, has raised over $650 million and funded over 1,000 programs focusing on prostate cancer, testicular cancer, poor mental health, and physical inactivity in men. Now therefore, be it resolved that I, Jeff Ellsworth, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, along with the St. Helena City Council, do hereby proclaim November 1st through November 30th, 2019, Movember Men's Health Month. And I will present this to Acting Chief Chris Hartley.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I will try and keep this very brief. Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, City Council, city staff, and the community for being here tonight. The month of November is near and dear to my heart, which I'll get to here shortly, and it's known as Men's Health Awareness Month. The state of men's health is in a crisis. Simply put, men are dying too young. Gender is one of the strongest and most consistent predictors of health and life expectancy. The second most common cancer in men worldwide, and the number of cases expected to almost double to 1.7 million cases by the year 2030. Movember is a movement that focuses on four main categories of men's health: testicular cancer, prostate cancer, poor mental health, and inactivity. Here's a few facts that I gathered from the Movember website. 1 in 7 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. 1 American dies every 19 minutes from prostate cancer. An estimated 220,800 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer next year. Testicular cancer is the most common form of cancer in men 15 to 34. 8,500 new cases are diagnosed each year, and 380 men die each year. 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. will experience a mental health lapse in any given year. The highest rate of depression in men is in age 40 to 59. There are approximately 3.2 million deaths attributed to the effects of poor exercise each year. 41% of men in high-income countries do not get enough exercise. When I said this is near and dear to me, I watched my dad battle with prostate cancer for roughly 11 years before it finally got to him. It went from prostate to his bladder to his bones, and he fought tooth and nail. He was only 70 years old when he passed. He made me promise him one thing, and that was don't listen to the insurance companies. They don't want to test you till you're 50, even though I had a father that died of it. I started with the city of St. Helena when I was 38 years old, and I started getting tested on my annual physicals. At the age of 47, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I know what it's like to get that phone call from the doctor. And my dad saved my life because I beat it, and I've been cancer-free for 12 years. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to tell my story and try and get out the importance of being aware. November 1st, there will be a link on the PD Facebook page. Once a year for the month of November, which we refer to as Movember, we all shave our faces. We have a little competition to who can grow the best mustache and the fanciest beard. And you can make donations through the Movember Foundation, again, found on the St. Helena Police Department Facebook page. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just found out today that you have to shave your mustache and regrow it. I thought I was getting a head start with mine, but so I have to start again. Okay. We'll move on to the City of St. Helena Proclamation on the National Friends of Libraries Week. Thank you. Whereas Friends and Foundation, St. Helena Public Library raises money that enables our library to move from good to great, providing the resources for programming, additional part-time staff, support for the library's various summer reading programs, and special events throughout the year, which help lead to positive civic engagement and the betterment of our community. Whereas the work of the Friends and Foundation highlights on an ongoing basis the fact that our library is the cornerstone of the community, providing opportunities for all to engage in the joy of lifelong learning and connect with the thoughts and ideas of others from ages past to the present. Whereas the Friends and Foundation understand the critical importance of well-funded libraries and encourage community support for the library, along with advocating to ensure that our library gets the resources it needs to provide a wide variety of services to all ages, including access to print and electronic materials, as well as expert assistance in research, readers advisory, and children's services. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Jeff Ellsworth, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, proclaim October 20th to 26th, 2019 as Friends of Libraries Week in St. Helena, and urge everyone to thank the Friends and Foundation for all they do to make our library and community so much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. It's really an honor to be part of Friends and Foundation and to support the outstanding library staff and the programs and the services that they provide to our community. Of course, this would not be possible without the generous support of individuals and businesses and organizations who donate to Friends and Foundation every year and who sponsor our annual and attend our annual fundraising event, Bookmark Napa Valley. So on behalf of the Board of Directors of Friends and Foundation, thank you for this recognition, and thank you to all of our supporters who help keep our library strong and vibrant. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Friends and Foundation for the tremendous support that they do for the library year-round. Through their generous funding, the library is able to provide, along with the latest books and DVDs, e-books, e-audios, and films through our online services of Hoopla and Canopy. Their use doubled in the last year, by the way. I just finished those statistics. Because of Friends and Foundation, the library can bring the citizens of St. Helena Spanish story times, summer reading programs not just aimed at children. There's a bit of chance for a bit of culture. Last week we had Blues in America come to the library. Thursday we're planning to have Soul Flamenco. Just a side note, I looked at the outage map. According to PG&E, there will be no impact at the libraries, so we're planning to do our regular hours and also our programs with a artist reception tomorrow, which is delayed from the last one, and then Soul Flamenco at 7 p.m. And then I also wanted to say that because of Friends and Foundation, we get educational programs like Extreme Science Magic and Jay Green's lectures. And we also give family events like the Great Library Bake Off, which had over 100 people. It was incredible. And Holiday Gingerbread House decorating, which will be back in December again. And then all of this, of course, is at no charge, thanks to Friends and Foundation. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Frank.
Yeah, you're right. A little space. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to our staff briefings. We're at item 7.1. This is our holiday lighting and Jingle All the Way. Presentation by Andre Pichly, our Parks and Recreation Director.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. Before I dive right into this, I want you to think about some of the events that we've done over the last year. And the first one that would have come along in the year of 2019 really would have been the 4th of July. And I want you to think about what you saw out there, what we experienced. And I'm not talking about the fireworks so much as I am that feeling of community, of people coming together, and of the pride I think we all felt at being able to show off our community and what we're capable to do in this small town, which if you're a lifelong resident, you burst with pride over things like that. And when you're someone like me who's only been here for a couple of years and you feel like you've been accepted by a part of the community, you can't help but just be so excited about. And I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. Fast forward to just this last week, and I do appreciate Paul and Jeff giving acknowledgement to the thanks and gratitude potluck, which really all we did was just kind of set it up. It was Mary Koberstein and Susan Kenward who did most of the legwork. In fact, other than us setting it up, they did everything. They got the band trio, they did the apple dessert bake off, and those are all Americana things. Those are the things that just make an event feel like it's got quality. But you throw in the people, the residents, all those people that came out to be part of that function, and that's just the type of feel you love. And you walk away from that type of event, and you're just really proud and really excited. And I'm really sorry that both Jeff and Anna couldn't be there, but your voices were heard, and people just loved being there. And then this past Saturday I drove home Saturday night, and I was just beaming, and I'm so excited about my job. And it was probably that little shot in the arm I needed, because you go there and you see the 5K, which is the partner that we have in the Montessori school running that event, and then the pet parade, and we can go down the list. All of the nonprofits that we're helping out with selling food, all of the vendors, our demonstrations, the bands, all of that stuff. The PTG setting up and running the kids area, which was fantastic. All of that is what it takes to put on an event like that. There's only 3 of us in our department, only 3 full-time staff. And so we have to leverage those partnerships, or we're never going to pull these type of things off. And it's the same for what I'm here to talk to you about tonight, which is our second annual Jingle All the Way. And the city clerk was kind enough to bring up the website, which is sthelena.jingle.com. And you can scroll through that and find out all sorts of information about the event. In fact, Stephanie and I were talking this afternoon, and she said that one Facebook post drove 131 people to click through the web page, which is pretty good, for the fact that the event's only been around for 2 years, and it's still trying to develop its presence in the community and in the region. To have that many people click through the actual web page is pretty fantastic. We've already sold tickets for the event. Tickets are $8 for kids, $12 for parents. So we really believe that $20 a parent and a child can go skate. And this year it's roller skating, which is unique. You won't find a roller skating opportunity during the holidays anywhere in the Napa Valley, anywhere in the region. So we're really excited about that. And it's that fun twist that we're able to do on events that just make it unique to our community. There are going to be 26 different schools up and down the valley that will be papered with flyers providing information about this. So we're really hoping to draw from the entire region. And one thing we want to make sure that everybody's aware of is every Thursday from 4 to 5, kids get to skate for the first hour for free. So we're trying to do a lot of things that will bring the community out to be part of this event, which will be going, by the way, in Lyman Park from November 29th to December 29th, every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Some of the things that people can expect would be not only just an outdoor roller skating rink, but it will be under a clear top tent that will be equipped with disco ball and chandeliers, nightly food trucks, and a bar for all ages. Actually, I don't think the bar is for all ages. Nimbus Arts roller skating cow featured in the grazing zone with fire pits and s'more making. And my favorite part about that area is it's going to have white Adirondack chairs, which to me there's nothing more relaxing than being in an Adirondack chair. I actually have a problem with Adirondack chairs. Santa will make guest appearances. There'll be a draw-dropping light display with over 26 LED-lit trees, 15-foot custom St. Helena lighted snowflake, which will be highly visible right there on Main Street. A big snowflake that you get to walk through that says St. Helena. Over 20 snow-flocked trees and a weekly skating in the snow. Live music, and I think that's it's going to look like snow. There won't actually be snow there. There will be outdoor cozy igloo hangouts. We have 3 igloos that will be there, and they'll have some nice, comfortable furniture in there. And there'll be fresh professional skating demonstrations and themed skate nights. So we've got a lot of things planned for Jingle. And thanks to Stephanie Akabachi, who is the lead on staff, putting this together, and her work with the chamber to make this happen. We're really excited about what people can expect this year out at Jingle. To date, we have secured $45,000 in sponsorships. We would like local businesses that are currently not partners to know that they have the opportunity to get involved and show their support by becoming a partner in this month-long, high-profile event that we believe shows the exciting, fun side of St. Helena during the holiday season. We would like to raise at least $20,000 more, and we believe that this is an excellent opportunity that businesses would have to help enhance a great community event that celebrates our community. And that's my report.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, we will move now to 7.2. This is our Upper York Creek Dam project update by Ms. Smithies.
Can we
Yes.
have a comment on the prior?
Yes.
Last year was fantastic. Thank you, Andre, and your staff for the work.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now with our Upper York Creek update.
Thank you. Since our last meeting 2 weeks ago, the city met with the regulatory agencies and the consultants and Spring Mountain Vineyards last Thursday. It seemed like a good update from the last rejection of bids, and we have a strong foot forward for a path to come to get permits for next year's construction season, along with the assistance of our electeds, to ensure that we don't have the backpedaling from our permitting agencies like we saw this year. We had a 50% drawing presentation provided to the agencies, and they all had a good feedback and liked the approach. It's engineered but looks very naturalized, and so we're trying to also potentially take down trees that are in the project to start the project earlier next summer, because we do have a northern spotted owl habitat in that area within a mile and a half. So without doing additional surveys, if we top those trees before next year, before February actually of 2020, it's a possibility we can get in and start the project much earlier in the summer, so we're not impacting traffic and or harvest season next fall. And that would be my update for now, but I'll have another update in 2 weeks.
Okay, are there any questions from the council on that? Okay. And then we will move on to our update on wastewater treatment plant.
We have a revised concept plan from our consultant that we plan to bring to council in the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks, depending on our financial plan and approach that we want to recommend to council. That its tie-in, the recent update is approximately $12.8 million for a total project cost. But we're going to try to bring back the financing recommendations along with the concept plan. The consultant, meanwhile, is working on the bridging documents that we'll need to bring on design build contractors in the following season once we have a defined approach with council. But we're hoping to bring that in probably the second meeting in November back to council.
And the anticipate when would it go out to bid then? Or do we have an idea of?
Next year, pending financing.
Okay. So now, thank you. We will move on to our consent items. I know that we're going to pull 8.4. We have other items. We have 8.1, 8.2, and my understanding is I need to read 8.3 in its entirety. So is now the right time to do that? Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to ask for the patience of everybody, the council and the audience, as I begin.
Can we also pull 8.2, please? So possible?
Yes, okay.
Thanks.
So 8.3, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution, 1, authorizing and approving classification and compensation study recommendations for mid-managers and department heads. 2, approving classification changes for those mid-managers and department heads recommended for a reclassification as noted on the publicly available salary schedules. 3, authorizing and approving implementation of compensation adjustments for all mid-manager and department heads to be within 7.5% of the market median study effective July 1st, 2019, and a 2% salary adjustment for all mid-managers and department heads effective January 1, 2020, 4, in accordance with the requirement of California Code Section 54953C3, including an oral report summarizing the recommended final action for the executive department heads which includes a 1.1% for the finance director, 7.2% compensation adjustment for the human resources and information technology, HR and IT director, 14.9% for the library director, 0.8% compensation adjustment for the police chief, and 10.4% compensation adjustment for the Parks and Recreation director, effective July 1, 2019, and a 2% compensation adjustment to the city clerk, finance director, HR and IT director, library director, building and planning director, police chief, public works director, and recreation director, effective January 1, 2020. 5, duly approving and adopting publicly available compensation schedules in accordance with California Code Section 570.5, and 6, approving the 6th Amendment to the Unrepresented Compensation Program to update Section 1.3, covered employees, with the new classification recommendations. Okay.
How'd you do, Mike?
So with that, I will take ask for a motion on the items 8.1 and 8.3.
I'll move approval of items 8.1 and 8.3.
I'll second. Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Shuto?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. And then we will start with 8.2, which was pulled. Mr. Knudsen?
So, Ms. Mitz, would you mind giving us a brief update?
Yes, I definitely.
Thank you.
So item 8.2 is approval, a recommendation for approval of amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement with Nolan Tam Architects. Their initial contract was $273,200. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the revised contract. The recommendation for the amendment number 1 is for additional $17,674, and what that is for is to cover the costs of adding a 4th design element and doing the initial cost analysis on it. Their initial agreement only included 3, and with council's recommendation at one of the previous city council meetings, it was a direction to provide 4. So that is what the difference is. 11.6% of that amount can come from civic impact fees as designated on there.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So then I'll entertain a motion to vote on.
Any public comment?
Oh, thank you.
We've opened it up.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public comment. Thank you, Mr. Biddle. And is there a motion on this item?
I'll move approval of 8.2.
Second.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, now we will move to 8.4. This is consideration and adoption of a resolution awarding legal services contract to Best and Krieger LLP and appointing Kara Ueda as city attorney. So I just wanted to pull this item to first take the opportunity to welcome Kara and also to thank Mr. Biddle for his help. His continuing help. He'll stay on for certain items. And we've done a lot recently to look at how we do our legal fees and have been able to bring costs down. And we want to thank Mr. Biddle for his help with that and thank Kara for stepping in and being part of what we're doing here. So are there any other thoughts or comments at this point? Okay, well, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you and to welcome you. So with that, I will seek a motion.
Any public comment?
Oh, thank you once again. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council.
I move that we approve 8.4.
Second.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we will move past public hearings, seeing none. We have a presentation from Caltrans, and we're going to move that up in our agenda. It's 11.2, but we're going to move it up now in front of 10.1. And this is a Caltrans presentation on Highway 29 Sulphur and York Creek Bridges Barrier Rails Upgrade Project. And Ms. Smithies, will you begin, take us into this?
So I want to introduce Ahmed Rahimi with Caltrans. He's one of our project managers for the district and our jurisdiction, and he'll be giving us a brief overview of the York Creek and Sulphur Creek bridge upgrades. He wanted to provide also an update for some of the bridge updates down south of us that Rutherford, that I believe you guys, the council, vice mayor and vice mayor requested earlier this year, but we didn't have time to. I don't know if we have time this evening, but he didn't provide that slideshow. He just brought the Sulphur Creek in York, but he can provide probably a brief overview of that. I'll let our technical capabilities get up here. And I appreciate you to come up this evening. He did provide staff, the last PSPS, he gave the public safety and agency jurisdictions that are available to show up the day of the first 2 weeks ago, a briefing on this project. And I believe he also proposed that the board meeting of Napa Valley Transportation Authority and TAC Advisory Committee, but he'll be doing some upcoming public engagement because it's early in the process, but early is good.
Good evening, City Council members and the Mayor, and thank you so much, Ms. Smithies, for arranging this and giving me the opportunity to present this to the City Council tonight. I'm again Ahmed Rahimi, one of the project managers for Napa County projects, and tonight I'm here to present to you the Sulphur and York Creek Bridges Bridge Rail Replacement Project. It's on State Route 29. Most of you are pretty familiar with the location. There are a couple of shots of the two bridges, the location of the two bridges, with the bridges in the pictures too. And here we go. So the project location and project description and complexities, existing conditions, project alternatives and construction, and project schedule is what I'm going to be presenting. And if you have any questions, I would take them at the end of the presentation. So the project is located in Napa County in St. Helena on Highway 29. And there are two locations that we're going to be upgrading the bridge rails for safety reasons and trying to also widen the shoulders a little bit. And so the two projects, the Sulphur Creek Bridge project, which is just north of Gott's hamburger joint, has two alternatives. And one alternative includes no widening and just providing a 4-foot northbound and an 8-foot southbound shoulder at the end of the project. And alternative 2 includes a widening, 4-foot widening of the northbound side of the highway and upgrading bridge rails and including 8-foot shoulders on both sides. And for York Creek, we only have one alternative, and that includes widening of the southbound side by 1 foot and upgrading the bridge rails to accommodate a 6-foot northbound shoulder, 8-foot southbound shoulder, and a 6-foot southbound sidewalk. And this project is pretty complex, and we are expecting an EIR and an EA. Hopefully, we will be able to reduce those by going through the public meeting and the comment process. And because we do have a lot of the species, we're working over the creeks in Napa County, and we are in the middle of town pretty much in both projects. And we do need to get permits from several resource agencies. And of course, we do have some historic values and resources on those bridges. We have some old stones that we're going to try to mimic with the new bridge rails. And of course, the new bridge rails will be a little thinner and provide more space for us to gain more space for our shoulders. And so also we need to get some right-of-way, obtain some right-of-way from maybe from the railroad, and that might not be easy. So, and also we do have some transmission, PG&E transmission lines that will require relocation prior to begin of our project. And again, the existing conditions, again, a couple of shots here from Sulphur Creek. area and showing the looking northbound and looking southbound. And what we have on the Sulphur Creek, again, we have a gas line that is attached to the bridge with the straps currently. And we have a pedestrian walkway and Napa Valley Wine Train railroad tracks on the northbound side, And then we have on the southbound, we have the pedestrian walkway with utilities running underneath that walkway. And of course, the southbound side of the bridge was previously widened. So at York Creek, basically we just have a whole bunch of utility poles all around it. And we also have some internet boxes, devices, and PG&E gas line, of course, is running. You may see on the top picture on the right-hand side of the picture on the northbound side of the York Creek Bridge. So for alternatives, for Sulphur Creek Bridge, as I mentioned in a few slides before, we do have two alternatives. Alternative one does not include any widening of the existing bridge, and however, it will require, if you can see the paved area, the gray paved area in the middle of the drawings there, over the aerial photo. That's the only lane we can provide with this alternative one. We'll have to take one lane to put the barrier rail on the northbound side, which is the top side of the photo here, and then there will be one-way traffic control. And this will, of course, at the end will result in a smaller shoulders too on both sides. Larger shoulders will be wider than what we have currently, but they will be a little bit wider than what we have currently. And this work might take anywhere between 2 to 3 months to do. Okay. Alternative 2 is not so bad. We'll be able to provide traffic lanes open in both directions, and we'll be, of course, widening the northbound side, which is again sort of on the top side of the picture with all the red and green lines. That's the construction area, and we'll be widening the bridge 4 feet, and that will allow us to have 2 lanes open, one in each direction, just like what we have right now. Of course, we won't have the shoulders that we currently have, but this is a more preferred alternative from my point of view, and I think that's what we're going to be hoping for, getting support from everybody, the locals and the public agencies. And so York Creek will have only one alternative. Fortunately, we'll be able to keep both lanes open, one in each direction, and we'll have 2 11-foot lanes open, and we'll widen the southbound side of the bridge only by 1 foot in order to get this done. And for stage 2, we have 2 stages on this project. For stage 1, we'll be going back again. We'll be widening on the southbound side. I'm installing the new rails on the southbound side of the bridge first, and then we'll move over and go to the other side, to the northbound side, which is top right sort of side of the photo here. And we'll be able to provide 13-foot lanes in one in each direction. And this is a little more detailed drawing of the projects. And the project schedule, basically we are planning to be in construction in the summer of 2024. This project costs about $4.1 million. And we're going to have a public scoping meeting November 5th from 5:30 to 7:30. And it's going to be at the Grace Episcopal Church over on Spring Street in St. Helena. and we'd like to invite everyone to come to that meeting. We've gone out as much as we could and tried to advertise the public meeting, so we get hopefully a lot of show-ups on that. And I'm going to have some of the mailers. We mailed out 3,500 copies of the of this meeting notice to the residents here in St. Helena, and I'm going to have about 10 copies of them out here on the table, so anyone who may be interested could pick those up. And basically, that's that. These are just some aerial photos. And if you have any questions, I would entertain that.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any initial comments from council?
I have one. Thank you very much for showing up. I really appreciate Caltrans. I think it's actually an amazing entity. If you compare it to other states' highway and transportation organizations, they're really extremely effective. I really hope we have members of the a member of the press here. I hope that the public meeting is able to be publicized, because this is 5 years away, or 4.5 years away. But I think the town is really defined by the 4 bridges which provide access to our town. Also the tree tunnel at the north of town, but really the York, the Sulphur, and the Pope Street and the Pratt Street bridges. And those bridges are all historic and very old bridges that really help define the town. And specifically the stone, they're not that high. They're only 2 or 3 feet high on each side, but they really are, I guess the Pope Street's higher. They really are character defining for the town. And I think that whatever solution could be or needs to be done, there really has to be something that addresses the look and feel. And I'm concerned that these things which so define the character of our town could be really swept away. And I would imagine that many of my fellow citizens might feel the same way. So this is going to be pretty sensitive.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and we are aware of this condition, and that's one reason why this project may be an EIR type of project, and long and tedious environmental process, and hopefully we'll be able to address that. We've already come up with some designs on how to use liners on the barrier rails, so they're not going to look like your standard Caltrans barrier rails. They'll mimic the look of the stones, and we'll be working with the public agencies and and public at large in trying to get the best look that we can get. And we'll also be using the lights, the vintage light poles. Will be reusing them, and also the plaques that are on the bridges. So we'll do our best.
Is there an additional council comment before I open it?
I appreciate those comments, and they're well taken. I just would encourage our staff and Caltrans to have really open communication, because sometimes the state agencies don't have the sort of the local knowledge about what our interests are. We have a number of moving pieces now. As we move forward, we have a streetscape project going through the middle of our town that will be implicated by these hopefully improvements to these bridges. We have bicycle interest. We have turning radius issues with big trucks who sort of need more room, left-hand turn lanes. All of those different things are going on at this point. So it's critical that we have good communication with our staff so that you get a sense of the needs that we have, and hopefully we can partner together to accomplish many of the goals that we need to achieve in this community that are consistent with the goals that you need to achieve. So thank you for your presentation. It's excellent. It's a daunting project, but apparently it needs to be done.
Thank you. And yeah, we're going to do our best to have open and constant communication with the city And, I just like to mention that we are a very large organization, and we had specific folks doing specific duties on every little project. We may have 100 or 200 people working on them. So sometimes I know that there is a communication breakdown. It's not very easy to keep everything flowing. So I understand that, and we're going to try to eliminate that. And we're trying. So let's see how it works out.
Thank you. Ms. Koberstein, any initial comment? So I'm going to open it to public comment. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open it to public comment, if there is public comment at this point. Please come up to the podium. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Carlota Sainado. I'm with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. I would just like to express our hope that in this project there will be safe and accessible bicycle and pedestrian facilities included in both sides of the road, so that all road users can safely utilize this important corridor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. I have a question and a thought. The question is, will the original stone from the bridge be used? Is that part of the plan, that the original stone will be incorporated?
No. But we will work with the city to see how we can preserve them elsewhere, maybe.
So there's no way that can be part of the project?
No, because, they have to be reinforcement and, yes.
So is that something that at this meeting on November 5th, and do I have the time correct? It's 5 to 7?
5:30 to 7:30.
5:30 to 7:30. Maybe we can get a little deeper into that discussion at that meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to have some samples of what we've done elsewhere, so we'll bring that out.
Okay.
Yeah. And then next year we'll have another public meeting. It's going to be a formal public meeting. This is more like an introduction, scoping of the project. And so when we get the draft environmental document ready, then we'll entertain more comments too on choosing the alternatives, and we'll be developing more of the detailed plans and specifics as to what everything will look like. So.
Okay, and then I also wanted to support the comments of the representative from the Bicycle Coalition to make sure that we're looking at, the next 40 or 50 years as we try to encourage that type of alternative transportation. We have the Streetscape program coming up, so I'm hoping that we can all be in sync in how we look at designing this so that it works for all these factors.
That's one of our requirements, for every design, everything that we do now, that to accommodate the pedestrians and the bicyclists as much as possible. And also we're working with Napa Valley Transportation Authority on, the new bike trail that they are working on. So we can put their bike trail maybe on some of our bridges as much as we can.
Okay, very good.
So we're doing our best on that front, definitely.
Any other thoughts from council? Okay. Staff?
I just want to say that the city's provided comments 2 weeks ago. Some of our concerns, as some of you are aware, the left turning lane movements at Pratt and Mitchell Drive. If they're widening the bridge, why aren't they widening it a little bit more to accommodate the more longer turn left lanes? Because we know they're not to design level. So those are some of the comments that are preliminary, as well as the bicycle and pedestrian access along that corridor.
Okay. So it looks like we're at the beginning of this discussion, and the next phase is November 5th.
Yes.
Okay.
Get a better, closer view of everything.
Mr. Koberstein?
Okay.
I do have one comment. It is very tight in there right now. I can understand the need for improvement, but I'm wondering if we are thinking of a separate area where the pedestrians and the bicyclists can cross without having to be part of the traffic and part of the project. And perhaps we could, even reuse the stone that apparently we're going to lose by not requiring that to be part of this right-of-way. I won't be at the scoping meeting, but it's...
Yeah, on Sulphur Creek, we have sidewalks, actually separated from the bridge in both directions.
Yeah, it's just very tight
on
in there.
York Creek is a little different, and there's not much room, and we're against a lot of things over there, so it's a little tighter. But we're going to be working with the Napa Valley Transportation Authority for their project and try to see how we can maybe squish them in there somehow.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflict going on in there with the railroad tracks and everything else, so good luck.
Thank you.
I hope we come up with a good solution.
Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah, Ms. Koberstein brought up something which I actually hadn't really thought of, but it's sort of a thing that's been kicking around town, particularly from the bicycle folks, just that the inadequacy of the Mitchell-Pope connector for bicyclists to try and go from the west side of town to the east side and vice versa, and perhaps there's a more comprehensive solution that might help to solve those problems at that particular intersection, which is really a challenging intersection, for at least for bicycles.
And we are having that discussion with our streetscape, how we look at how we move through town. So this would be I think the right time to coordinate with Caltrans as we look at best possible solutions.
Absolutely, we are open to that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate your being here. Thank you for
giving me the time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. With that, we will move back to item 10.1. This is review and discussion of possible backup standby generator regulations. This is prepared by Mr. Henry, our building official. Are you prepared to come up and...
Yeah, I'll just give a quick statement. So as everyone knows, permanent backup home generators have been a topic of recent discussion as a surge in installations have occurred due to the continual threat of PG&E power shutoffs. So essentially, we've just provided a summary of how several jurisdictions regulate the noise and placement of generators for your discussion and consideration. And Philip Henry is here should you have any questions.
Are there any initial comments from council?
I just wanted a clarifying question. It's only the permanent ones. It's not the smaller.
That's up to you guys. You can take on either one or the other.
Any other initial council comments? Okay, so I'm going to open it to the public. If there are public comments, seeing none at this point, I'll bring it back to the council. My thought on the issue is that other cities appear to have looked at this issue and have come up with some potential ways to create an ordinance to give a little bit of regulation. I think it's worth considering. Is there any other council comment?
Absolutely, we should consider it. I think it's a useful thing for, because these are relatively new and, they're noisy. I think it's useful for us to look at it more closely and also to look at the potential screening or ways that we can encourage those that do install them to screen it from neighbors, just from a noise perspective. I also selfishly want to say that I've learned that actually also solar plus battery oftentimes will allow you to escape the need for a battery powered generator. So for the citizens of our fair town, look at all options, please, as we face these apparently recurrent and imminent power shortages.
I was very interested in that option, but it is really expensive, or it is a more expensive option currently. When I was looking into it, it seemed like there are some mufflers that you can buy if you do have the cheaper versions that are less expensive that people might buy, and you can get a $30 fix that could make it more quiet. So I'd hope that we could, if we do send out some information, include that in there to offer some solutions for people that they might not be aware of because this is so new. I had a list. We had a emergency prep meeting today, and there was the County Fire Safe Council gentleman, Christopher Thompson, and he had a list to consider just safety, if we do look at this, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I would go through it just in case. Storage of gas for generators, this could be a concern. Proper ventilation, noise, buy the accessory muffler for the unit, or make sure it can be added. You can also go to our local Perriott motors for Honda. They are more expensive. They're in the $1,000 to $4,000 range, but they're really quiet. And then they can also service them here in town locally.
Commercial plug, I like it.
Yeah, well, hey, local town. Never add fuel to a running generator. Properly sized extension cords. Undersizing the wire can cause a fire. Do not attempt to open junction boxes or circuit breaker panels to backfeed from a generator. Just seem like there's so many new issues with this that could create an issue. It would be great to get that out in the community.
Mr. Henry, may I ask a question? So we're seeing a number of different ordinances and the bulletin from Santa Monica. Would you think a synthesis of looking at these different municipalities, has anything risen to the top as comprehensive, or do we need to keep looking at how to combine items from the different cities?
Yeah, so all of them kind of have a general theme, and like on testing generators and stuff, some are a little bit different on the noise regulation, depending on the time of use. Some of them restrict to a little bit less noise decibel rating between the hours of usually like 10 and 5 or 10 and 6. But in general, yeah, we just focused on staying at the 65 decibel rating that we've used in the past, and that, of course, not all generators are running at full load at all times, so there's different decibel ratings for generators depending on the load that they're under. I would think at night, during the hours of 10 and 6, if a generator is running, it's usually going to be running at a less load typically, because most of the appliances and things would be off. Yeah, there's quite a variance on some of the things, but there's some common themes about like testing of generators, only using generators during power shutoffs or emergency type situations. So we could certainly focus on that, yeah.
Any thoughts on forward movement?
Well, I'm struck by the comment by Councilmember Knudsen, and maybe he has more information on this he could share. He indicated generally they're noisy. I'm not sure what the data is on that. One of the things I would suggest that we do, that the police department does, is when we receive these noise complaints, we're about to go into another one, so we'll probably have more generators operating, to inquire whether this is a permanently installed generator that is a noise issue or a portable generator. I do think that some of the portable generators are quite noisy. I know that for a fact. So it'd be good to develop the data. I've driven by a couple of the homes that I know have generators during this period of time, and actually got out of my car and listened, and it's not really great information, but it's a good sense. I couldn't hear anything during the day, and I did it a couple times, but I do know that the sort of portable generators are a different breed, and I think that at some point we need to sort of grapple with that issue. What are your thoughts on that?
That's correct. So currently we have no regulation on a portable generator. Somebody could go down to a home improvement or hardware store and buy a portable generator and then just run an extension cord. There is no regulation. The regulations that we do enforce is if somebody comes to us for a permit, and that would be a permanently installed backup standby generator. Typically those are substantially quieter. They're built into an insulated housing, so they're typically quieter. They're automatic. They shut off when the power's back on, whereas a portable generator would require somebody to kind of be aware of that, may run longer than necessary, that kind of thing. So yeah, the portable generators that you can just buy off of a shelf at the store, There's no regulation that we have that I'm aware of. Maybe they would fall into the category of our noise ordinance, but generally we as the building division, we don't enforce that. So somebody could just buy one and set it up in their driveway or on the side of their house, and we would, as a building department, we don't enforce it, and we're hoping they're not trying to hook it into their electrical system.
Any other?
No, I heard a comment from somebody today that told me that their neighbor had one. It must have been, I don't know the data exactly. She said it went on automatically. It was on all night. They lived out of town, and it was so loud she couldn't sleep. And so it made me think about, and this was during the power outage, what could we do? Should we do something, or should we not at all because it's a power outage? And then is there a solution that we could be telling people that they could get to make them quieter after the case or not?
So, once again, a commercial plug here. There's a app on my phone called Decibel X, which actually allows you to determine how loud something is based on the microphone from your phone, and I understand it's reasonably accurate. I think it is the sort of the permanence of the generator, but then again, the power's off, so what are you going to do? I don't know. It just feels like we should have some specificity around it.
In thinking about forward movement, is it compiling, creating an ordinance using what we consider the best of what we see from the other cities, and coming back to council and running that through us at that point once we have something crafted?
Yeah, we could. We certainly could.
What do we think here? Does that sound like a next step?
Since you told me I could sit here during this, I will offer a couple comments because I do have a standby generator. I had one in Maine, and it was a different situation there because the power would go out for a few hours when there was a storm, and then it would come back on. I mean, this last incident, 2 full days basically of no power, and that the power shut off starting at midnight for no apparent reason in my mind, causing the generator to fire up. I'm also wondering if we can't continue to work with PG&E and make these things more user-friendly to the community when they happen. I can tell you some of these generators come with a mobile app, and if you are out of town, you can turn it off. But otherwise, it's really hard to power it down once it goes up, especially in the daytime. It's programmed to provide power to a certain amount of the house. I also think they're not as noisy or not as noticeable during the day because there's other ambient noise going on. But at night, when it's quiet, and but for these generators, of course, you hear them. I don't know what you can do about it, frankly. Mm-hmm. I do think it is important to regulate the portable ones, and also to be sure that the others that are being installed are getting permits, because it is a real issue about connection to the gas supply and your electrical requirements, and I fear that there are some people out there putting them in without permits, which could be a problem.
Mr. Doring, any thoughts?
So I agree that we should probably come up with an ordinance where you might want to give a couple of alternatives, A, B, on some of the more important issues like decibel levels and those kinds of things. It's hard for me to give direction because I don't know enough about these issues to know what is appropriate, but maybe a draft ordinance where you'd have, a couple of options under the salient, more important items where we go A, B, and C, that would be helpful for me. I know you probably want direction from us, but I don't feel qualified to give you direction at this point. I feel more comfortable sort of reacting to an amalgamation of different points from different ordinances, put it together, bring it back, and let us sort of grapple with it. That's my comfort zone. So I don't know.
I think that's very helpful, and the idea of perhaps presenting a few options on certain points that look like there may be some point of discussion. So to me, I support that idea. Is there consensus?
Good.
Okay. Does that give you some direction?
Yeah, I'm just mentally kind of thinking through process here, and if this is something we decide to put in the zoning code as opposed to like the noise ordinance, we want to run the draft through the planning commission first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that's wise. Okay, so with that I believe is where we need to go with this. You have the direction, and we can go forward. Thank you. Appreciate your being here and the information.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, so we will move now to item 10.2. This is consideration, discussion, and direction regarding policy of City of St. Helena pertaining to the provision of water services to new development on property located outside the City of St. Helena city limits. And this is prepared by Mr. Biddle, our city attorney.
Okay. At the council's May 14th meeting, the council discussed the practice of the city issuing will serve letters outside to property outside the city limits, and directed.
Sorry. Do you need to?
Yeah, I'm choosing not to participate in the discussion because of the concern of a possible conflict of interest arising from my husband's employment with Hall Winery. The Hall Winery is located outside the city limits and has a current connection to the city's water system. The council will be discussing adoption of a policy of general application which will potentially affect the interest of all properties located outside the city limits that have an existing connection, including that which is owned by the Halls. I'm choosing to recuse myself from the discussion because Hall Winery is my husband's employer and thus a source of income. It's very.
Okay, thank you. We'll give you a minute to get set up there.
Thank you.
So, at the council's May 14th meeting, the council discussed the practice of the city issuing will serve letters to property located outside the city's limits, and directed staff to come back at a future date for its consideration. Policy addressing will serve letters and water use agreements for water service to property located outside the city limits. The focus tonight relates solely for the consideration of approval of will serve letters to serve new development as defined in the city's code on property located outside the city limits. The terms, conditions under which the city might issue enter into a water use agreement, that's for a topic for another evening and is not part of the discussion this evening. As the council knows, the city's general plan sort of serves as your constitution for regulations related to development of property, and in that general plan, the council has a public facilities and a services element, and within that element of the general plan, the city has adopted various policies related to the provision of water, and there are three such policies that really sort of touch on the provision of water service outside the city limits. And in particular, there are sort of two that I would direct your attention to. It's PF-1.3, which provides that to prohibit water service to new customer outside the city limits unless a potential threat to health and safety can be demonstrated. And then PF 1.4 provides that to proactively reduce the city's commitment to provide water to uses outside the city limits. So consistent with that policy, PF 1.3, the city's code prohibits new water service connections or water main extension outside the city limits except under certain limited circumstances. And those include providing fire service or reclaimed water service. And similarly, consistent with the general plan policy, new development, and I'll touch on the definition of that shortly, new development on property located outside the city limits must have an existing water service connection in order to then continue to get water service for that new development. And in connection with that new development, it requires a water use agreement. And so the city's code defines new development as any construction project involving 1, any freestanding building that contains water-using fixtures, 2, any floor area additions to existing non-residential structures, or 3, any residential additions or remodeling that increases the number of independent living units. So, in addition to the general plan policies and the code that require new development to have an existing water service connection, so to the extent you want to engage in new development, sort of construction, addition to, let's say, a residence. So in addition to requiring an existing water service connection, and then also requiring a water use agreement, the purpose of tonight, because those are already existing requirements in your code, the purpose tonight is to discuss whether you want to add some additional provisions that would come back in the form likely of an ordinance under which an applicant or a new development would have to satisfy. So first, one of the things that we would ask you to consider is that the existing service connection that is in place was either previously approved, so it's shown that it was approved by LAFCO, or was established on or before January 1, 2001. And the purpose of that is that provisions of the government code involve LAFCO approval to the extent that the city wants to extend the provision of services outside its jurisdictional boundaries. And to the extent it does, you need to get LAFCO's approval. So we want to require any new development to show that they do indeed have that approval. Alternatively, if they can show that the service connection was established before January 1, 2001, because there is a exception to LAFCO's approval to the extent that connection existed prior to that date. So that would be one item for the council to consider. Second, to the extent you can show that the existing service was approved by LAFCO or existed prior to January 1, 2001, the council can consider whether the applicant must have to show that the water service has not otherwise been abandoned. And so if you want to think about that, and I provided an example that you have in your existing provisions of your code relative to non-conforming uses, and a non-conforming use provisions there provides that that a use will have been abandoned after a period of 60 days. So to the extent this new development is coming in and they can show that they've got LAFCO approval or was prior to January 1, 2001, you would also want them to show that they haven't otherwise abandoned that service for 60 days or more, or whatever period of time that you think is appropriate if you want to sort of consider that additional element. Third, we would suggest that the applicant have to show that the new development does not have an alternative source of water, and then fourth, we would suggest that the applicant must demonstrate that the project is water neutral in accordance with the city's water neutrality policy, and which currently provides for off-site retrofit and payment of in lieu fees. And one of the things that we wanted to bring to your attention and have you consider, some other jurisdictions, they have provisions for instead of retrofits, they also provide for offsite measures of improvements, such as replacing, rehabilitating, landscaping at a city park or something, or not landscaping, irrigation, let's say, at a city park. So those are the main issues that we've, as staff, sort of fleshed out. The other aspect of this that we think you should consider and discuss is, where does that will service letter approving authority lie? Is that something that would lie with city staff? And so city staff would evaluate and make sure that an application otherwise is complying with all these various criteria to receive a will serve letter. And then the staff could, assuming that the applicant does, that they could issue the will service letter conditioned, still nevertheless conditioned, on entering into a water use agreement, which would then subsequently have to be approved by the council. Or whether the council wants to reserve all of those, approval of the will serve letter and the water use agreement to itself.
Thank you. Is there any initial...
Light topic for discussion. Sure.
Is there any initial council comment? I will open it to the public. Seeing none, I will close it. I've got a couple of questions or thoughts. So on fire service, would we, in a sense, be saying that if somebody came to us opening perhaps a commercial activity outside of city limits and came to us, they had an alternative source of water but just came to us for fire service, would we be bound to give them that? Would that be a requirement if somebody came to us for that use?
Well, I believe your existing code provides for the provision of water service outside the city limits. I would hesitate to say that you're bound to provide that. I think it generally, does that come from potable water? I believe it does, you're saying?
Clarify the question?
So is water service provided via potable water?
Yes.
Okay.
Fire service.
Yeah.
One of
to your question, I can't say I can definitively say one way or the other. I really didn't look at that issue per se.
So I guess one of the issues that I have in terms of providing city services outside of city limits is that we're then enabling a use, and that use has certain impacts. We're finding potentially on traffic, on employees, on housing, and so when we consider whether we serve outside city limits, what is it that we're serving? If there's a previous hookup that has a certain contract or an agreement, and they change the use of what they're doing, we know that St. Helena is part of Napa County. We have an agricultural preserve here. One of the tenets being that the growing of grapes and the processing of wine is supposed to be what happens in the county agricultural preserve, where more commercial use and housing goes to the cities. But if we are now being asked to provide water for a changing use in the county, do we have some ability in that case, if the use is being changed, to decide we want to do something different?
I think that's a good point, and I wanted to bring it up under the discussion of new development, because I think that may be too restrictive, that we might want to consider something beyond what falls in the current definition of new development. I mean, we just maybe this is not a great example, but we just had a business change where Dean and DeLuca used to be. I don't believe they have a current water agreement, but there is a new business in there, albeit very much the same. But I don't think it qualifies for the definition of new development under our ordinance. And there might be other situations where there are existing buildings that don't meet the new development standard, but something different happens in them that could be more intense. And I think we have to be prudent about our potable water supply and where it goes and how much of it. So I think the answer to that first question is maybe we should consider something broader than our current definition of new development. I think on the fire, I mean, what we're saying is if they have an alternative source of water that satisfies all health, safety, and other codes, I assume that means that water can provide fire service. You know, and in which case, why would we? If they have an alternative source that meets all applicable codes, I'm not sure we would be obligated or need to provide them with fire service. Now, I don't know what they would have, but, you know, I think that your question is a good one, and maybe that is the mechanism by which we determine that.
Do you have a comment, Ms. Smithies?
We did have a good example of like Prisoner Wines asked us for a fire system. Then they said, "Can we just use your hydrant that's in the public right of way?" But but they were working on their own fire suppression system online. It turned out to be more economical for them to do their own upgrades on site when they saw how much the impact fees they'd have to pay to tie into our system.
Mr. Knudsen, Mr. Doring.
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on here, and I just wrote down a bunch of notes, things that came to my mind, so they're a little bit disjointed.
Sure.
With respect to water neutrality, I know in the past we've had a difficulty sort of defining the base use, and I think we need to do some more work there. And particularly, I've been involved actually as a lawyer in a couple cases here in town and other places where a use has been abandoned. The building was demolished and it's been bare land for years, for example. So the question is, what is the base? And I think we need to focus on that. If something has not been in existence, they may have a connection, there may be a supply of water that's not being used. Is the base something that they were doing 10 years ago, or is it the current actual? I would say it should be the current use over so many years. I think in the area of water neutrality, we need to hone in on that so we can have a really good comparison, the before and after. From my perspective, I think the city should be the ones hiring the engineer to do the study and pass that cost on to the applicant. We need to maintain control over that to have sort of a more control and a better sense of, hey, this is being done for the city, not necessarily the applicant. I think you're going to get better results that way. I'm also concerned about those existing water agreements where, the agreement may be in existence for 10, 20, 30 years, but now we are faced with a potential change of use or an intensification of use. They may already have. They don't need a will serve. They may have a situation where they're just changing the use and expanding it, or intensifying is the only word that comes to mind. And I think we need to be on top of that issue and have some guardrails to prevent that from getting out of hand. With respect to the will serve letter and the water agreement, it's my recommendation that they shouldn't come one and then two. Will serve condition upon water agreement. They should be coincident. Both should happen at the exact same time. And I think it will cut out a lot of uncertainty in between those two periods of time. You get a will serve letter condition on a water agreement. Just have the water agreement and the will serve letter come together at the same time.
I think if you did that, I don't know that you necessarily need a will serve letter. I mean, you would probably have recitals.
The county would. The county would still need the will serve letter. I don't know if we would, but I think they should come together.
Well, I think you should do what you believe works for you.
Right.
That's my sense of it.
One of the other concerns I have is, with respect to LAFCO and, this notion of having to prove an existing connection. My concern, my issue spotting is a potential lot line adjustment or merger of properties where you have a connection on one property and you now want to use that connection to satisfy another property. I would not be in favor of that necessarily. Maybe, but at least that's an issue that I think, that, long time existing connection with city water, but somebody acquires a property next door to it or happens to have another property. We probably have other code sections that may apply to that, but I just want to make sure that there's not a loophole there where you can rely on one to service another. As I said, I'm just kind of going through my list here.
Okay.
With respect to the authority, I think that the council should have the authority to issue the will serve letters. There may be an exception in my mind with a single family development. Some people, I don't even know if they actually need a will serve letter or not, do they? So that might be an exception, which is not as concerning to me. But in general, most projects should, in my mind, should come to the city council for a will serve letter. I think it's just too important. I think that the water neutrality issue is sort of understated here. That to me is the most important issue. I think that's where you're really going to get into situations where we're protecting our water supply. We don't have an unending water supply in the city of St. Helena. Folks think we do, and we should be able to control that. With respect to sort of these retrofits and those kinds of things, one of my ideas would be, well, if we're going to change that and allow other things other than a retrofit of the toilet, those mechanisms should be inside the city, not outside the city. We should benefit inside the city from whatever someone does to be able to establish or to maintain water neutrality. That shouldn't go outside in the county. I think that's important for us to have that in our water neutrality policies. I guess one of the other things, and I haven't really, this is half baked in my mind, is when we talk about alternative sources of water, one of the things that occurs to me that probably has not been used is technically Napa water, city of Napa water is an alternative source of water. It has to come through our pipes. I just don't want to necessarily preclude that as an option for somebody. Someone who could say, look, I'll go and buy water from the city of Napa, but I need your pipes, and so you're going to have to charge me for that. I would like to have that as a potential option. I don't even know if that's possible, Bernardo, if anybody's done that. But in terms of an alternative source of water, I don't know what the answer is there. I'm just issue spotting on that. That could be a potential source of water for somebody. I don't know. Who knows? Those are a few of my thoughts for now.
If I can just comment on that, I think Napa Water is now serving Caneros under, they had requested water service, and it could be trucked in or it could be piped in. And so I don't think what you're suggesting is out of the realm of possibility. And I don't know if we own that pipe in 29 or they own that pipe. And so I just think we should be aware of the fact that there may be other sources of water and people willing to provide it. And that's one of them. That was, and I believe, I don't have all the facts, but this was authorized by LAFCO on the basis of it being sort of a health and safety issue at Carneros. And speaking of LAFCO, I don't know when they would authorize this unless the property is within our sphere of influence. And our sphere of influence is coterminous with our city boundary. So there's no place that I could see LAFCO authorizing this unless it became one of these Caneros situations, possibly south of us, some residential units might have some issue. But I think it does point out the importance of spheres of influence and why you think and plan that way, because you think of something as a logical extension of the city where you're providing services. But it's not working that way for us in St. Helena. We're stuck with a sphere of influence that isn't influencing anything outside. So that's just kind of the reality of LAFCO at the moment.
So, Ms. Koberstein, would you then state that those provisions actually, it's essentially a catch-22, that no one can actually receive new water because we don't have a sphere of influence outside of our city limits, and this is a policy for new water outside the city limits?
I think what I'm saying is that every party here has to recognize, and that the county ought to recognize that when development is being approved outside of the city and they are telling people to come to us for water, that area ought to be recognized as part of our sphere of influence and not fought by people. And when annexations come about, there should be able to have a reasonable discussion, because that's the whole purpose of a sphere of influence. And so I think it works both ways. I would like to see our sphere expanded because for all practical purposes, we are providing a lot of water outside the city. But I think it's incumbent on other parties to recognize the fact that we're doing that and, adjust the sphere and be reasonable so we can all coexist here.
I have two comments on the comments. One is that this was a discussion that was had at planning, when I was on planning, was the sense that all of the benefits of sort of, low flush and low flow and this, that, and the other thing, eventually you get to a point where there isn't much left, right? And I don't know where we are, but might be closer than we think. The other thing is, my understanding is when we look at our water infrastructure, I believe we own the pipe to the delivery to everyone we're delivering to. I don't know where the intersection is between Napa and us in terms of moving water from down valley, but Ms. Smithers, I bet, can tell us.
Smithies, but it's Rutherford. It's in Rutherford, right in front of the grill is where our pump station is. In our meter from the city of Napa. And we own the transmission main.
And right, so everything until the Rutherford Grill. And that's essentially where we're delivering. We're not delivering water any further south of the Rutherford Grill. Is that correct?
I believe it's all north from there.
Yeah, I believe. So therefore, that's our pipe. And it would be odd, I would think, to deliver Napa water through our infrastructure. If they want to truck it in, sure, but sort of our infrastructure, and it'd be hard to come up with a cost to that.
I think it'd be good to nail that point down. That seems logical to me, because I don't think the water goes anywhere else beyond us in that pipe. It's not a transmission to something other than St. Helena, correct?
Did I miss something? I'm trying to remember as I was reading. There was some discussion at some point, and it may not have been in this, of if we can't or are not annexing, if we are providing water outside of city limits, is there a way to talk about some type of additional fee or tax to offset the fact that, we're providing a city service outside the city limits? If we provide it in the city limits, we get property tax, we potentially get sales tax. So if we're now providing it outside of city limits, in a sense, to a direct competitor of ours who's benefiting and perhaps causing impacts, is there an additional fee or something that might approximate what would happen if they were in the city limits?
Well, I think that's a discussion that might be better had when you get into the discussion regarding water use agreements.
Agreements, okay.
Yeah.
In addition, as you were, Mayor Ellsworth, we're working on the engineering assessment for the water rates inside and outside the city, and the various pump stations or higher elevations. We put that on hold to see where the master utility plan would come in before we would recommend any changes inside or outside the limits based on the known CIP costs.
Okay, so in those studies, those engineering-based studies, we can find perhaps some of those answers. Okay.
Correct.
So what do we need at this point to move forward? What do we, Mr. Biddle, where do you think we are?
Well, I think we've provided some ideas that we could present at a future time for the council to, enact as part of an ordinance that I think further refines, the issuance of will-serve letters. I believe there are a few comments that were made that, particularly I'm looking at some of the comments from Councilmember Doring that I think really primarily, not all of them, but a lot of them related to the existing water neutrality policy, which is, I think, is sort of a separate animal from this discussion. We're talking about thou shalt, as part of this, thou shalt comply with the water neutrality policy. And I think what Councilmember Doring is identifying is perhaps the need to sort of revisit that and tinker with that some more. So I think we got a couple of bits of work product to prepare. One is sort of a look at that a bit, and then also to come back with some suggested language to sort of codify some of these suggestions for you, and perhaps maybe at that point where you kind of see it in sort of a legislative format in a code, it might help you better, I think, to say, okay, yeah, this works, or maybe we have some other ideas, and and go through a couple, revisions of the ordinance before we finally settle on something that you're comfortable with.
But you feel that we've given you some of our enough of our concerns that you can start to shape something?
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of intrigued with the idea, the definition of new development in that Councilmember Koberstein raised related to perhaps we should be including sort of change of use concepts within that, such that to the extent you're coming in with a change of use, not just doing merely some addition, and it may be for the same type of use, but you have an existing connection and you're not doing any addition. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. You're not doing any addition, but you're changing that from one form of use to another. Well, you still need to come in and get essentially need to get a water use agreement from us, from the city, so that the city will continue to provide water to that new use, which is within the definition of new development, theoretically.
Yeah, and I think related to another issue we discussed, if we did provide water on a health and safety basis, and then it turned out subsequent to that, somebody did obtain an alternative source of water, I should think we would be able to terminate our connection, so that we are, if somebody has a source that satisfies other codes, we are not obligated to continue to provide water to that outside customer.
I think that would be, hold on to that idea. I think that's something we would want to include in a water use agreement. But I think it's probably also worth trying to capture here somewhere as well. But
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to sort of see our policy points kind of revised as we've discussed them, and then work towards some code modifications or whatever comes next.
Okay. Do we feel we have enough here to move on?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Here you go, Kara.
Okay. Thank you. I'll get Anna. did. Okay, we'll move on now to item 11.1. This is quarterly grant report for fiscal year 2020, quarter one for the period ending September 30th, 2019. And this is Mandy Kellogg, our Administrative Services Manager.
And I'm going to be taking over for Mandy tonight. Unfortunately, her daughter got sick, so she had to go home, so I'm covering. So this is our first quarterly grant report. So this covers any activity that happened during the first quarter of 2020, which fiscal year 2020, which is July 1st to September 30th. So here are our newly awarded grants that we received during the first quarter. The first is the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and this is an SB2 planning grant, which allocates $160,000 to the city to go towards the comprehensive zoning code update, which is part of a larger project of $500,000. So we are very excited to be awarded that contract, and we should be bringing that contract to council, I believe, the next council meeting. The second newly awarded grant is the Bulletproof Vest Partnership. So this allows the city to purchase 4 new bulletproof vests. The total estimated project cost is about $3,100. It does require a match of the city, about $1,700, and the grant that we received is just short of $1,400. And the last grant that we received is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So it's a TDA 3 grant, and this is for Pratt and Elmhurst crosswalk improvements. And for the total project estimated cost is $80,000, and this grant covers $50,000. Pending grant applications that the city has, these are definitely some of them are some repeats from before. The first is Cal OES FEMA, and that's for emergency backup power. We did apply for this grant quite a while ago. The total project costs are estimated about $661,000, and it does require a 25% match from the city. And Cal OES has submitted the grant application to FEMA, and it's currently under review from FEMA. The second grant is the Department of Alcoholic Beverage, so ABC, and it's an alcoholic police partnership program. And what it is, it's a shoulder tap program where we utilize juveniles to be able to go in and try to make purchases of alcohol in local establishments. And then the last grant is the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and this is Project Lifesaver. It's a $5,000 grant that we submitted an application for. And what this does, it does provide funding for services and technology that can be used to locate at-risk citizens that are prone to wandering and become lost. So we're very excited about that potential grant opportunity. Our active grant highlights is the Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration Project. So the total amount of grant funding available for this project is about $2.2 million. The city did request in the first quarter and received an additional $5,000 draw. And so right now we have drawn just shy of $50,000 from this project. As the project becomes underway, then we're actually going to be able to draw more of that $2.2 million. The Friends and Foundation, so this is for library enhancements. As of September 30th, the city has spent just shy of $35,000 on library materials, staffing, and programming. And the city did receive the first disbursement, or the final disbursement for the first disbursement for fiscal year 20 in July for the first quarter. The next grant, active grant, is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So this is TDA 3, Hunt Avenue Sidewalk Gap Closure. So during the first quarter, we did begin construction on this particular project, and then we're anticipating that it's going to be closed at the end of this month, correct? And then the last active grant is the Department of Justice, the Prop 56 tobacco grant. And so this allowed us to place a school resources officer within this school district. And we do have continued patrol and enforcement of public areas such as parks and attending the DARE training. And there was a total of 1 violation reported in this period. The closed out grant highlight is our Department of Housing and Community Development home grant that we did in partnership with the Napa County Housing Authority. And this total grant was awarded for $500,000. We were able to spend $450,000, just shy of $450,000. And this is in rehabilitation loans. And so what happens is now, as the loans are paid back to the city, the funds are put in a specific fund that's designated for the city to be able to facilitate loans, again, more loans. Nonprofit grants, so for fiscal year 18-19, so this is a follow-up from the end of last fiscal year, the city did execute 17 grant agreements. We did expend just shy of $108,000 for various nonprofits. 2 organizations did forfeit the grants, and 1 organization was approved for an extension of their grant because they were not able to expend the funds during fiscal year 18-19. And in fiscal year 19-20, we do have 21 applications that have been funded. Community enrichment, there was 11 awards for a total of $50,000, and programmatic, it was 10 awards for a total of $169,000. And that concludes a very brief presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any initial council questions or comments? Seeing none, I will open it to the public. Seeing none, I will close the public comment, bring it back to the council. Any thoughts? Well, I will just say thank you for pursuing these grants and keeping this program going. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and it's nice to have somebody watching and seeing what comes on the radar. So thank you. Okay, with that, we will move now to item 11.3. This is consideration and adoption of resolution of the City Council and the City of St. Helena regarding the refund of defense cost on appeal application of Joseph C. McGrath pursuant to St. Helena Municipal Code 17.08.060 in a range from 0.00 to an amount not to exceed $87,201.37. And this is prepared by Mr. Biddle.
Thank you, Mayor. As the council will recall, at your meeting in August of 27th, the council approved an ordinance adding provisions to the city's code authorizing applications for refunds of the city's defense costs on appeal for residential projects. The ordinance became effective on September 26th, and Mr. McGrath filed an application with respect to his residential project at 632, McCorkle Avenue. And a copy of his application is in the report. As noted in the application, Mr. McGrath is requesting to be released of his obligation to indemnify the city for the defense costs incurred by the city in the Court of Appeal proceeding McCorkle Neighborhood or Eastside Neighborhood Group versus City of St. Helena. And in that proceeding, the city incurred, or his application is seeking relief from $87,201.37. The staff report in its discussion initially indicates that identifies the need that the application pertains to a residential project as defined in the ordinance, and then it indicates that it has satisfied that requirement. However, questions have been subsequently raised, and we are able to confirm that in fact the project does not comply with that definition, because the units that were provided, the affordable units that were provided as part of the alternative equivalent that the City Council approved, 2 units at Grayson Street, those units do not comply with requirements under RENA. The RENA obligations with respect to units such as these are provided in the government code, and in order for these units, which were essentially they aren't units provided at the actual project site. They were existing units on Grayson Street that Mr. McGrath agreed to restrict to one to very low, or to low, excuse me, and the other to moderate income. That affordable housing agreement was in fact recorded recently. However, for those types of units to satisfy a city's RENA obligation, the city's housing element would have had to have had a program identified within the housing element, which of course the housing element is approved by state HCD, and the housing element would have had to have complied with certain specific requirements that are set forth in the government code, and one of those requirements would have required essentially a city commitment of resources, essentially to make sure that that the units were in fact created. So understand, as part of your housing element, you have a regional housing needs allocation. So the city is required to provide so many total units, and of those units, so many have to be very low, or moderate. And so when you're processing your housing element, the HCD is looking to see how you're going to meet that obligation. And if the city wanted to say, listen, we are going to try and satisfy part of that obligation through either rehabilitation of an existing unit, or conversion of an existing unit, or preservation of an existing unit, then the code sets out some fairly specific requirements that would have to have been in the city's housing element, and of course, as they say, approved by HCD, where you would have said, listen, we're going to affirmatively go after, let's say, an existing unit and convert it as it's defined in the government code. We're going to convert it to an affordable unit, or we're going to preserve it or substantially rehabilitate it. And I'm kind of glossing over a lot of technical language that's in the code, but you would have had to have had that in the housing element, and as I say, you would have had to have provided some sort of commitment that gave HCD some confidence that you, the city, would in fact be able to achieve providing for that unit pursuant to that program in your housing element. The city doesn't have any such programs in its housing element pursuant to which Mr. McGrath's 2 units would have had to comply in order to satisfy the city's RENA, satisfy that RENA obligation. So we are in a situation, and I will note that the language about having that these units would also not only have to satisfy the city's code, which it does because the council approved, the alternative equivalent, but the ordinance that was adopted, and there's a copy of the first page of it on the screen up there. The provision regarding the RENA obligation was added at the request of the Planning Commission, and it seemed, for all intents and purposes, to be a reasonable addition. So that provision is there. Going on, I think if you want to have a look at subsection, so it's in of the code, and this is for the council's consideration. If you look at section 17.08.200 subsection F, and if you can go to the next page, please, Cindy. I don't know if you can. Yeah, that's really hard to see. But the last sentence of that section provides that the foregoing notwithstanding, and maybe I should back up. The application comes in. We provide this report. we identify whether in fact Mr. McGrath has complied with his obligations. I've noted in the report that in fact the fees for the attorneys have actually been paid by the city based on some understanding that I'm not quite privy to. And as a result, the city has in fact paid for those attorneys' fees, and Mr. McGrath is now being asked to be relieved of the obligation to essentially pay the city back. And so one of the findings in the resolution before you is essentially a finding that, notwithstanding the fact that that he hasn't paid those, that the council will nevertheless consider relieving him of that obligation. And this subsection F provides that, you know, in your discretion following consideration of the application and testimony, the council, you know, can approve, deny, approve the application, appropriate funds, allocate funds, and authorize the expenditure. And then the very last sentence goes on to provide the foregoing notwithstanding, if the applicant has not paid all trial court litigation defense costs, city defense costs on appeal, or complied with any indemnity requirements or conditions, then unless waived by the council upon a showing of good cause, the council in its discretion should deny the application. And so the language that sort of caught my eye, if the council is inclined to waive conditions, and one of them being the condition that that these units do not meet the RENA requirement. I had an exchange earlier with Councilmember Koberstein about that. I mean, that is one possible avenue if the council is inclined to try to see a way to consider Mr. McGrath's application.
Is there any initial council comment? Okay, so why don't I open it to public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So when I left my house tonight on the way here, I kind of felt like I was on a glide path to finally sort of close the last chapter in this book and move on. And then I was informed, you know, somewhere in that journey up by the city manager that this sort of poison pill had been discovered within the city policy. So my world history teacher here, Toby Wolf, who taught here for many years, had a poster on his cabinet, and the mayor might remember this, but basically I think the quote was something like, work hard, with diligence, integrity, and honesty, and you shall be rewarded. And it was a picture of a guy with a big screw right through his abdomen. And that's kind of how I feel. You know, if you opt to sort of say, well, oh, the letter of this law sort of, which doesn't reflect its spirit, is such that, you know, whatever we've sort of committed or made a intent to commit prior, we're not going to do, then so be it, I guess. I did want to provide just a little bit more context to this, particularly for the council members that sort of have not been with this the whole time. We put in the application for this project in February of 2016. On January 31st of 2018, I was informed by email that the interpretation of the inclusionary requirements was different than what was understood, and that I needed to provide 2 units of the 8 as affordable housing. I was under direction and under understanding and had been told by staff up until that point that I could pay a $40,000 in lieu fee for the affordable housing requirements. To put this in perspective, the 20-year net present value of a low and very low relative to market in this town over 20 years is about $500,000. It's pretty straightforward. It's about $1,000 a month on low, and it's about $1,400 to $1,500 a month on very low. And so if you just multiply that out and assume everything else being equal, it's about a $500,000 request 2 years into a $3.5 million budgeted project. At that point in the project, in the spring of 18, I had $1.5 million invested in the project. I had spent $200,000 on defense costs. Most of that was with the city of St. Helena, city attorney. And the design was frozen. I had a DR approval that had already been through Superior Court trial and had prevailed and was frozen. Any changes I made to that, to make it more affordable to absorb the 2 units, would have reopened everything to litigation again, all from scratch. And all the engineering had been completed, all the civils, all the architect, all the structural documents, everything was done. For those who've followed this from day one, I originally started with 10 units on this project. And by your municipal code, the municipal code requires concessions to be granted for affordable units. But when the design is frozen 2 years in the project, your hands are basically, we're handcuffed to figure out a way to make this more economical. We absolutely would have said, I want parking concessions because I need to put 2 more units on there. Much to the chagrin of the neighbors, but that wouldn't have made any difference anyway because I ended up being sued all the way to California Supreme Court. So we would have absolutely done the things necessary to absorb those units. So at that time, and it's important to also know that most of these legal fees were in defense, not really of my project, because my project met every ordinance, zoning code, building code in this town. It met the intent of the general plan. It's precisely the exact type of project that the city needs. And I spent most of this $280,000 or whatever I spent reimbursing the city already. That's beyond the 87 we're talking about. Defending the procedures of the Planning Commission and this council. Most of their case was about the procedures of the planning staff, the Planning Commission, and the council. Little to do with my project. Anything that had to do with my project was also a sort of spurious allegation, has been proven through 3 levels of the court. And anything that had to do with CEQA was really defended by my attorney at my cost, directly with them. They were the CEQA expert in this matter. So I just get, at that point in time, the project was not viable. So I did the best I could to come up with an alternative equivalent proposal, which was the Grayson units. And I asked for 2 things at that time, 2 significant things that could have reasonably preserved the viability of this project. Do the alternative equivalent with Grayson, and release me from the indemnification here on. And the reason was, with the uncertainty of going, I knew these guys were going to take it all the way to California Supreme Court. With that level of uncertainty, it just makes the further investment that much more risky. And I likened myself at the time, I'm in the middle of a river here. It's as dangerous to go back that way as it is to go back forward that way. So the city agreed to that, and the city committed to sort of honor, move in a direction. And so we've been doing that for 1.5 years now to move in this direction. And then here, once again, 11th hour, I feel like the goalposts have moved. So I don't know what to say. What we have built, even if this is all about RENA or meeting budget numbers or things like that, what this really should be about is creating a built environment that can meet the socioeconomic sort of
range of the people that it takes to build a community. And so even if we could build affordable housing through nonprofits, subsidized at the rate it has been, at any reasonable rate, which we've proven we can't, 2 projects have taken a dozen years, and one of them's not even built yet. Even if we could do that to satisfy affordable and below, or moderate and below, there still exists a range from $120,000 a year annual income for a family of 4 to what it takes to buy a single-family home, or even rent in a single-family home. That's at least $200,000, at least. So there's a whole median income working class there that has nobody's building for, and there's no formal program for, and there's maybe or maybe not a city council that is supportive of that need. So I thought we were on a glide path. This to close this up. I'd walk away. It's not a good investment. I'll live with it. I'll survive. And then I heard this, and I was just like, okay, fine. I really trust that the council can find their way to make this happen. If not, well, so be it then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there, seeing no other public comment, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to the council. Are there any initial thoughts here?
I just think that we're going to need private partners to take care of our housing needs, and this was an example of that, and I would like to find our way to fully reimburse him. Or what is it? It's not reimburse him. We've already paid for it. Relieve him of the entire amount.
Mr. Knudsen?
When I was a young man, I tried to read a book called Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. It was really hard to read. I probably only got 50 pages into it. But Mr. McGrath has reminded me of the lessons of that book, which is, I mean, it's a Kafkaesque nightmare that that project has endured. And I don't want to point fingers, and I don't want to cast any aspersions. I think all parties had what they consider the best interests of the neighborhood and the town at heart. But at this point, we've really jerked them around. And I don't honestly understand this latest legal twist, but we have a couple attorneys on our city council, and can you guys help us?
How do we navigate? Is there some thought from this side?
Well, I guess I wouldn't call this a poison pill. When we sent this ordinance to the Planning Commission, it did not include the language about compliance with the RENA requirements. They added that language, and I suspect didn't have any idea of what the effect of that was on this particular case. It's not just a matter of Mr. McGrath saying, well, I'll restrict the units for a longer period of time. That isn't going to make it comply with RENA. As Mr. Biddle indicated, there are other things at play. But I think we all worked here to try to find the most equitable solution. When it became known that the project had not been put through the inclusionary ordinance analysis. And I firmly believe that if he had known that in the beginning, we would have had a whole different project, and we would have had 2 newly constructed affordable units on the property, if not more, that absolutely would have complied with the RENA requirements. But it's because we went through this alternative equivalent proposal, and not just that we went through that, but the time that we went through it, which, as he said, was after he had all his entitlements. It's intended that you do this before he would even go to the Planning Commission for his first hearing. So yeah, this is Kafkaesque, no doubt about it. And I think we have to find an equitable solution here, whether it means we send this ordinance back and we revise it, or we exercise our power. I'm looking at the first sentence of F that says, in our sole and exclusive discretion, following our consideration of the application, we can deny or approve the application. I'm not sure how far that gets us, but I think we have to close this chapter in a way that is equitable. The fees that were paid at the trial level to reimburse us were significantly more than Mr. McGrath had to pay his own attorneys. And I don't have a problem that the city undertook to then pick up the costs on appeal until we dealt with this. I'm not quite sure how that came about or what the mechanism was for doing that. But I think going forward, we have to fix this. We have to fix the housing element. And I think we, with our new city attorney, have to take a very close look at our inclusionary ordinance and the alternative equivalent actions to see if we are actually satisfying RENA, if that is one of our main objectives. Because we have a laundry list of things in there that we can allow people to do, and many of them are not going to satisfy RENA. So maybe we have to just loosen up on the RENA satisfaction. I mean, that certainly is an objective of ours, but there may be circumstances where we don't say it has to fit the letter of the law every single time. So I'm in favor of a solution to relieve him of his indemnity obligation, and I'm interested, to hear ways that we can go about doing that.
Mr. Doring, do you have any thoughts on those possibilities for ways of doing that? Or any thoughts in general?
Well, I echo the comments of my fellow council members. I think this is a unique case. I'm in favor of relieving this applicant of these appellate costs. I'm probably maybe one of the only one of you that actually reviewed the trial court bills, so I have a different perspective on those, and I certainly can understand Mr. McGrath's frustration there. So I am all in favor of that. I'm sort of haunted, maybe blessed by, believing in the rule of law and making sure that we're not making an exception to the rule of law that would apply to anybody else under these circumstances. So I'm going back and forth on that issue. Clearly, I would say there was... Well, it's not actually clearly. I don't know exactly what the deal was in terms of these appellate costs, but apparently there was an agreement that these would be waived. It certainly was not an agreement that directly came from a decision by the city council. I can assure you of that. Certainly there were signals saying this is something that we needed to entertain. How that got translated to the applicant, I don't know. I wasn't privy to those conversations, but I think they probably did occur in some form or fashion. I am immediately looking at the provision that our council has pointed us to. I'm not feeling really strong about that, but I do think it satisfies me that we can probably waive the RENA requirement at this point based on that. It's a close call one way or another. But I think given the equitable considerations and the long-standing history of this project and how it went, I'm inclined to support Mr. McGrath's arguments and application to relieve him of those costs. So I am cognizant of the fact that these kinds of things sometimes have precedential value. Someone comes along later and says, wait a minute, you were able to waive a certain provision for Mr. McGrath. But even with that, I think that, the fact that, we went through this whole process with the alternative equivalent situation where we had these 2 units. We agreed that they would be 20 years. I tried to get Mr. McGrath to go to 30 years. And he made persuasive arguments against that. There's a whole series of processes that happened before this application and the development of this ordinance that I think play into my mind. So I'm of the mind to grant the application based on the language that council and apparently Ms. Kloberstein have pointed to.
I agree with that. I found some problems with the initial approval process, but I also, in looking at the fees charged, the legal fees, I also found they're troubling in the amount. So I support the idea of finding relief. And so I guess what we're looking at is the precise mechanism for doing so. As you say, Mr. Doring, a concern about precedent.
And you have to treat everyone without fear or favor. I mean, that's the goal. So if there's something that we need to fix, then we need to fix it.
Mr. Biddle, what are your thoughts?
Excuse me, the language that I was looking at is in that subsection F, and it does provide for the ability of the council to waive certain conditions. It's not, I think, as Councilmember Doring alludes to, it's not entirely clear, but I think to the extent it's your ordinance that the council adopted, this is the first time through, and to the extent you want to take the position that you have the authority under that subsection F to essentially waive compliance with certain conditions, then I think you have the ability, you can then apply that to the condition related to RENA and move on that. And what I would suggest in your resolution is that we just add a finding, a specific finding that you are essentially waiving that requirement for compliance with the RENA obligation. So other than that.
Mr. Doring, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Ms. Koberstein?
Yeah, and I just think we should put this on the, work list to fix, the ordinance.
You would like more specific.
Moving forward, I mean, maybe just instead of saying must also qualify, we could say, we'll endeavor to get units that qualify. Because in a situation like this, it was impossible to get units that qualified.
Okay.
So moving forward, using our power, in this case, to grant the relief, but then also re-looking at the ordinance to make sure that in the future we have some flexibility there.
Yeah, I don't see anybody right now, who's going to fall under this ordinance, and I certainly think we have the time to be looking at our inclusionary ordinance very carefully and our alternative equivalent actions and do what we need to do there and with the housing element so that this is not a trap.
Feel comfortable, Mr. Knudsen? Mm-hmm. Okay, so do we need a motion here at this point?
Yeah. That would be good.
Okay.
So I'll move that we waive the fact that Mr. McGrath has not paid any of the defense costs on appeal to date, grant Mr. McGrath's request to be released of his obligation to indemnify the city for defense costs on appeal in the total amount of $87,201.37, and adopt the conforming resolution as amended by the suggestions of council to reflect the decision of the city council.
I'll second.
A roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. So we will move on now to our final item. This is item 11.4. This is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving the POW MIA flag to be flown on the city's ceremonial flagpole the week preceding and the week after Memorial Day, that's the last Monday in May, and the week preceding and the week after Veterans Day, November 11th. This was brought forward by myself at the request of a number of citizens, residents in our town, and I wanted to put it before the council. And this is a flag that honors those who originally came out of the Vietnam era, but has come to represent all of those who did not come home from their service. And so in my thought, it's appropriate that around these two holidays that this flag be raised. And so I wanted to have the discussion at the council level.
I'm supportive of the request. It was a little confusing. I'd need some clarification on the request, because there's another part of the request that didn't really get translated into the staff report, and that would be the suggestion that it fly together with the American Legion flag. That was a request by you and this group, but that didn't really that didn't get into the staff report necessarily. I don't see that there. So is that still part of the request or not? Two different flags apparently to be flown at the same time. I'm okay with it. It's not a big deal, but I just want to make sure we satisfy the applicant's request.
I think it would be appropriate to have the American Legion flag. They were the ones who brought it forward, and to me it gives a little more context to the POW MIA flag. So I would be, in my mind, supportive of having both flags flying together.
Is that a typical flag configuration with the POW MIA flag flying ahead of the American Legion?
I don't know.
And can we even do it? Can we do two?
We would need to order the extra attachments for the pole, for the flag raising. We could add two flags to it. Because we don't currently. We only have the single flag ordered.
So the resolution could be to have at least the POW MIA flag in the interim period, because you can order the attachment in time, possibly. I got to say, I'm really supportive of the idea to support our veterans, and one of the things that I like about the current City Hall, maybe the only thing I like about it, is the plaque outside, which has the names of those that fought, on our behalf. So, I'm for it.
Me too. For it.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I'm just concerned as a process issue. So we did not ask for both flags to be flown in the staff report. Is that okay to proceed and say we're going to do that, even though it's not really technically? I just want to make sure we're doing things correctly, because we can bring it back. That's not. In other words, that's not what the agenda item says. It just says the POW MIA flag to be flown on the city's ceremonial flagpole. I don't want to be a persnickety here.
It's exactly right. We can only approve the POW MIA flag. Later on, we
can certainly bring that one back.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a.
You've answered your question.
Yeah,
thank you.
So I think if we can proceed with this, and then we can at some point come back and.
Before Memorial Day.
Yes.
I'll move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second.
Or whoever recommendation.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilor Koberstein?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Eldred?
Yes. With that, that's our final item. I thank everybody for being here and for your focus, and I will adjourn the meeting.